Republicans have continued to make the case for 4 more years of Donald Trump as president, as the Republican National Convention continued on Tuesday night. Speaking from the freshly renovated Rose Garden at the White House, renovated of course by herself, the First Lady Melania Trump promised that she and her husband would continue to fight the good fight for American families in the second term. But she also addressed the problems the country is currently facing at a time of racial unrest and pandemic. It was a carefully choreographed night that featured several members of the Trump family.
As you are fighting for your families, my husband, our family, and the people in this administration are here fighting for you. No matter the amount of negative or false media headlines or attacks from the other side, Donald Trump has not and will not lose focus on you. He loves this country, and he knows how to get things done. We must remember that today we are all one community, comprised of many races, religions, and ethnicities.
For his assessment of the First Lady's speech and the rest of the convention, I'm joined now from Atlanta, Georgia, in the United States, by Erol Morkoc, who, among other things, is a political strategist and media spokesman for the Republicans. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I know it's pretty early in the morning where you are, so we appreciate your waking up and giving us the benefit of your analysis. So what's your assessment of the convention, first of all? I mean, it's been summed up as more based on reality TV, more glitz than the Democrats. Do you agree with that characterization?
I would definitely agree that it's more based in reality than the Democrat Party is a convention for sure. We put a strong emphasis on making sure that every part of our convention was done live and in real time as much as we can. You know, it was an incredibly strong day for the RNC's re-election campaign. The familiar faces who we saw out there, like Secretary Pompeo or Eric Trump or our wonderful First Lady Melania, who really finished the night with her powerful speech as an immigrant. As an immigrant myself, when we were all able to use the power of social distancing and this reality spectacle to share the naturalization ceremony of 5, wonderful, diverse Americans from places like Sudan or Bolivia who've come to America legally and properly and made a life, and to share that naturalization moment was just really powerful for the whole country. So it's a little bit unfair to characterize it as reality TV when we're living in this global pandemic and everybody has to be socially distanced. Perhaps the difference is we didn't write a living eulogy for our candidate. We actually put our candidate out there live in real time for the people to see who he is, how he speaks, and what he stands for. And the American people have been resoundingly responding, tuning in, and are keen and eager to hear this kind of live leadership as opposed to a choreographed, synchronized swim team that you got out of the Democrat National Convention. So those were the biggest comparisons I saw between the two.
Well, I mean, I have to agree with you. The general impression appears to be that Melania Trump had gave a very personal, very human speech there, and it appears to be a winning tactic for her to acknowledge the pain that many Americans are feeling at the moment. But I suppose my question is, isn't it time for the president to try that tactic?
And by try that tactic, you mean just in what sense?
And show some empathy for the people who are suffering across America.
Oh, well, that's going to be a very polarized concept, because whenever Donald Trump opens his mouth and says anything, half of the country is going to take that as a negative. Half of the country is going to take any word he says is something that's not empathetic. So we can take the horrific murder of George Floyd. The first thing he did was come out, show empathy, demand justice, try to speed up the investigation. When you take count the kids at the border who are being sent across the border with no parents, nothing, into the desert without any sort of plan or hope, and a lot of them were dying or sexually assaulted. By making a strong border policy, these kind of things that are castigating him as some sort of heartless individual are actually things that you do out of compassion. Like when tough love, you have to kind of set things straight. So perhaps I would agree with you that in the way he speaks and the way that he carries himself sometimes, when people are looking for a little bit of a social opioid, some way to just hear the president say everything's going to be okay, perhaps Donald Trump isn't exactly that kind of guy because of his personality type. But his supporters and those of us like myself who've had COVID-19, actually, we saw his leadership as paramount, and we only feel the compassion. So right now, the sad thing is that the compassion, when a Democrat speaks, only the Democrats hear it, and our people don't, which is sad. And when Donald Trump speaks, they don't hear any compassion no matter what, and that's also sad. And that speaks to the balkanized, polarized political situation in America, which is nothing to be proud of, to be quite honest.
Well, you're certainly right about that. But I mean, beyond the empathy and whether he sort of, speaks empathetically to many people in America, I mean, COVID-19, for example, is still ravaging the country. Some countries have contained the disease much better than the Trump administration. And in terms of how badly countries have been hit, I mean, the US is top of the list. Is that the reason that this convention is hardly mentioning the pandemic?
Well, I think the pandemic itself, as we all know, has been a terrible tragedy around the world, and the Trump response has been perhaps different than other countries because of economic factors and because of the fact that the way the information was presented and the way that the actual death rate was presented compared to the amount of deaths and depression and what could be lost by completely shutting down your economy, also having these negative effects. But his response to the pandemic, as far as the government response needing to send PPE or have any sort of ventilators or anything, I mean, they went from warp speed from 0 to 100. The country is prepared. The issue we have is social problems. I mean, people don't really listen. America doesn't have this sort of homogenous cooperative culture that you can perhaps find in smaller European nations. So as soon as you had the protests kick off and the violence kick off, it was very hard to hold the line against, let's say, garden parties and beach parties. The American people, the American individualist spirit is working against us when it comes to COVID-19. But also when you look at the actual, you had a higher chance of dying from a stabbing, for example, in London last week than COVID. You have, death rates precipitously falling. You don't have hospitals overwhelmed. And I think the message was to focus on positive things coming in the future and the reopening of the American economy, where Donald Trump had built the strongest economy we ever had known until these foreign pestilence had hit our land. So I think the COVID topic has been front and center of the American political and social dialogue for the last few months. So the idea that it wasn't front and center of the campaign doesn't surprise me, as it was other things that we were trying to focus on, because nobody is in confusion or lost on the fact that that is the most pressing pandemic and threat to our current health and safety of our country today. But in the long run, it's going to be the election of somebody like Joe Biden, who would do a much worse job for our country than anybody here could imagine. So I think the focus is on getting Donald Trump elected, not repeating the nonstop dialogue about COVID-19.
Well, I mean, talking about getting Donald Trump elected, I mean, he's trailing in the polls at the moment. I mean, what do you think he needs to do to give him that extra bump and a better chance of securing a second term? And we've got about 30 seconds, so do keep that answer brief, if you don't mind.
Right. Well, it's a great question, and I can answer it simply. He needs to reach out to those suburbanite voters. He needs to reach out to Hispanic voters. He needs to reach out to anybody who puts family first, who is a taxpayer, who understands private property, who wants to see their kids back in school. He needs to do the same thing as he did last time. The polls are not showing the real American people. You call an American, you say, will your neighbor vote for Trump? They say yes. Would you vote for Trump? Oh, I never would. So the silent majority that will not be silenced is going to come out, and on November 3rd is going to, I believe, give Donald Trump a landslide victory.
Right. Erol, I want to thank you very much indeed. Erol Morkoc, who is the political strategist and media spokesman for the Republicans, talking to me there from Atlanta.